guess I better go over those.
What's that?
I wonder, how hard do you think it would be,
They want to adjust.
Is this a WAM thing?
John?
Yeah.
How hard do you think it would be for, like, when someone buys stuff, they just put down on supplies to itemize them for us, so we see what's going out?
Like what supplies is.
Yeah, like chainsaws and
I wouldn't think chainsaws would be supplies, I think it'd be tools. A chainsaw blade would be supplies, does that make sense?
makes sense, because that one's $3,000. One of them's $3,000.
For what?
Yeah, I don't know, I looked at it earlier.
It's for us to make sure we agree to keep the streets in the town.
Sure you're ready.
What am I putting on?
Call the meeting to order. Would you please stand for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I'd like to open a public meeting for liquor license renewal.
So we just have the annual liquor license. It's the regular date. Everything's been submitted to the liquor division, and so we just have to see if there's public comment.
Do
Questions?
any of the folks that have their license have to speak, or we just,
Nope.
okay?
Do we go each license at a time, or?
Nope.
I make a motion, we approve the liquor license.
This is just public meeting. So, yeah.
I was going to approve it.
So is there any
Any
public
comments?
comments?
Honorable Mayor Pro Tem and Council, thank you for taking the time with us this evening. I'm Robert Short. I'm representing Janella Short, owner of the Higgins Hotel here in fabulous Glen Rock, Wyoming. We appreciate the opportunity to be part of the business community here and appreciate the efforts that you guys put forth to make sure that we have a stable regulatory environment in which to operate. We thank you very much for helping us understand what's necessary to comply with all of the regulations associated with operating a liquor distributor, if you will. Sorry, it's a bar actually here in town. And we hope that we comply with everything you desire of us and that we're good neighbors for the rest of the folks in this town. And that's pretty much all we have to say about it. I'll stand for any questions and try not to lie.
We're delighted to have your business in town and wish you the best.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robert. Any public comment?
Any more comments? Okay, we'll close this public hearing and open up the council meeting. Is there any additions, deletions, changes?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. Minutes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes for our July 8th meeting.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any more discussion? Motion carries. Reports?
I have nothing to report.
No reports. 30th of July, I will go to the Commissioners' Work and Dinner Session down at the Higgins We'll be attending that.
Councilman Nunn?
Oh, sure. I just want to acknowledge that our treasurer, Kelly, took a 6-hour class combined with other training and her work experience that qualified for her for certification as a public fund investment manager, which is lifetime certification. Congratulations. Way to go, girl.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Congratulations, guys.
That it? I attended the Glen Rock After Hours event at Reed's Red Hots. It was pretty good. I would say probably 25, 30 people were there. So it was pretty good. If you missed it, it's too bad. It was a good time. Okay, moving on. Items on the floor.
Wait.
Well,
No,
other reports.
Aye.
Okay.
Kelly,
I actually have nothing.
you have nothing. Sorry, Kelly.
Just that I did receive my certification at the National and appreciate the opportunity, you guys letting me go. It was good. There's a lot of information. Be working on a few things going forward, so that's all I have.
Mr. Rumpler.
Evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. Crew's been busy with parks work, garbage collection, sewer maintenance, street sweeping, mosquito spraying when we can if the wind's not howling, and equipment maintenance. The North End Water and Sewer Project is moving along fairly well. They started on 6th, they're already across, or started on 4th, they're already across 6th. They will continue to 9th with the sewer line, and they're going back to do the water. So that will be paved curb to curb, so that's going to be all new street down there in Platte. Mesa Verde storm drain is complete. I forgot to put that in my report. I apologize for that. And shouldn't flood down there anymore. Should take care of that issue. Our SCADA system for the water system is up and running, and all the radios have been replaced, and then we got everything repaired on that, so now we know what our water system's doing. That's all I have.
All right.
Hey, hey, Randy, on the mosquito spray, is that a nightly thing if weather We permits? try to do it every night if the wind's not howling. Okay. And if it's raining, you can't do it either. We get calls like you do, so. Yeah.
I have a question. I see we're having a sealed bid for a chainsaw.
Yeah, the seal bid was open Friday.
Okay, how many bids did we have?
2.
And what was the reason for getting rid of this chainsaw?
Sat on the shelf for 4 years.
How much did we pay for it? Do you know right
Paid
offhand?
$1,000 for it, a little over 4 years ago.
I just kind of hate to see, we should have just kept it, I think. You never know when you're going to need it down the road.
Well, we used to cut the trees and everything, but then the council decided to hire Willie. And we just haven't used that big saw. It's a 32-inch bar on it. There's no need to pick. We have other saws. We just didn't need that huge
And-
saw.
And I'd like to see the bids when so
Okay,
the
Kelly,
ones that came in.
she's got
Okay,
I have them in my office.
okay. And another thing, this side-by-side four-wheeler, why does the town need one?
They want one for the parks and plowing the walk path.
I thought we had a John Deere for that we did.
It's getting on its last legs, and the crew
Well-
has been asking for a side-by-side.
I think we need to spend the money a little more wisely. The John Deere seems to be working fine, it does great. I don't see a need for a side-by-side four-wheeler.
It was in the budget.
Under four-wheeler or,
It was under parks, under their equipment.
well, I'm against it, so I'm just letting you know. And let me see, what else was there? Oh, and the bids are in on that, right?
On side-by-side? Yeah.
Yes,
I wasn't going to award anything until Bruce is back.
okay. And we will get a chance to look at the bids, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
Randy, did we make a little bit of money selling water to the trucks that ran up and down the street also?
Oh, yeah.
That was a good project?
Yeah.
Did you get the thing fixed that got broken over there?
The hydrant?
Yeah.
Nope, waiting for parts to come in.
Do we have to fix it, or are they going to be responsible?
No, we'll fix it. I don't want anybody goofing with our fire hydrants. I want them repaired right.
We don't miss the trucks.
Okay, Scott?
Building department. As of last Monday, we started CPI on the survey of the city block corners. They'll survey every block in the town of Glen Rock and officially mark each corner with a tablet pad that they embed in the concrete or in the ground, so for legal purposes in the future, we'll have that reference on here. Building permits from the last month were 26 new permits, 17 open permits, and 13 of them are pending. Tonight, we'll have a housing study presentation that I think all of us are looking forward to. The Deer Creek Museum is moving the building that we budgeted for them down off of the BR Ranch, the old Miller Cabin. It's 100 years old, and it'll be happening within the next 3 weeks, and they could really use some volunteers and some help to get it set back up, and got to replace some logs and do a little bit of work on it, but that little cabin's got a lot of history to it, and I'm glad to see them bring it down off the mountain.
Scott, who's doing the move on that?
Dwayne
Olson?
Olson, yep.
Okay.
And, so he'll be moving that as soon as maybe this weekend, but they'll leave it, put it on the trailer until the foundation and tank is poured out there.
And pray it comes down in one piece.
It's gonna be a delicate move. Code awareness. We've had codes and ordinances in place for years and years. If you read the newspaper or the town Facebook or the town website, you'll see that we put a notice in the newspaper for public courtesy. We will start enforcing our codes and ordinances in town. Grass, weeds, automobiles, abandoned properties. It'll be starting strictly enforced on the 25th of this month. So I will spread the word to all your friends and neighbors to read the paper, figure out where it's at. Glenrock is a great little town, we're gonna clean it up.
Question on that, and maybe Randy can help on this. All those lots that Mr. Gray has up in Sunup,
He's included in this.
okay,
Yes.
you see, okay. Is he aware?
He will be
Okay,
Thursday.
there's some up there shoulder high.
Yes, there is, and there are fire hazards.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
And it's getting drier.
Who is going to pass these notices out? Do they go in the mail? Do you knock on the door?
Well, we have Stuart, which would be code enforcement, and then some will have to be by mail because some of the property owners are not local in town. We will do, according to our ordinance, notification of those properties and those owners. Then if response is not taken, then we'll abate the situation ourselves.
Like one notice, that's it? How long do they have to comply with it?
3 days.
Oh, nice.
I know a lot of folks in town, small businesses that like to take care of that.
Yes.
Folks that like to use them, some kids in town.
Okay, my only comment is the crew's doing a great job with the weeds, but the town has to make sure theirs are gone, because the first letter you send out, they're going to say, what about the town?
Yep.
And they've, nothing against the crew, they've been doing a good job.
We've seen that.
I mean, you got to make sure.
And we're very well aware of that, so.
Gotcha.
Scott,
that's it. Yes, ma'am.
the remodel you're doing on those bathrooms, on that room upstairs, that's really looking nice.
Thank you.
I like that.
Tell Randy that, will you?
Randy, the work on the bathroom upstairs is really looking nice. I like it.
Thank you.
Chief of Police?
I got Mayor Pro Tem, Council. I have nothing of significance to report tonight.
It's a good thing, Chief.
You've had no new recruits or anything, any new officers coming on?
But nope, we're going into the next phase of assessment for applicants, and there'll still be a few more weeks before we know if we have somebody to hire or not.
I wish you good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, items from the floor?
I got a question. I suppose I'll have to go up here.
Yeah.
I'm Bob Nunn. Thank you Mayor Pro Tem and the council. Question to Scott, your code.
Yeah.
How much teeth you put in this thing you put out in the paper
How much
to
what?
enforce the codes?
How much heat?
Teeth.
Teeth.
How much bite?
Everything we got.
How much is that?
Well, it's, in our code, in our ordinance states, if we abate your property, you will be charged double the cost of what it costs the town to do it. And if you don't pay that within 10 days, we attach it to your water bill and we shut your water off.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
You bet.
Dang.
Shut your water off.
Mean.
Pretty serious.
Press, Scott.
In the summer, you shut their water off?
It's our ordinance.
Wintertime is the gas.
There's no weed in the winter.
Okay, no more items on the floor? Yes, ma'am.
I have a little problem. My tree was fertilized and now it's growing crazy in front of my house. But there's branches over the sidewalk. And I know we're supposed to have 8 feet up from the sidewalk. Is there anyone that could come and trim it? And I will pay the city for it if they'll do it.
Yes, there is. We
Willie.
have several tree trimmers on the list. And that would be the homeowner, would that be city?
Is it in your, actually in your lot or is it in the boulevard?
Oh, no, it's right in front of my house. I'm
Along the street?
No.
Yeah, on my side of the street. Yeah.
She's saying it's hers. She'll pay for
It's
it. She
yours?
just needs
It's
help
mine.
finding somebody.
It's called Willie Contracts with the Town. He can do yours too. You can
Okay.
pay him.
Is there a certain telephone number for that?
And I'll get it to you.
Okay,
All right?
thank you.
You bet.
Anything else?
Mr. Mayor, may I ask Sharon a question? Our food bank lady, how are you doing with your project?
I'm Sharon Kemp, and the food bank is doing wonderfully. We now have all of our licensing in order, and we asked the city to help us with the first truck, well, 4 trucks for this year. And as soon as we hear about that, and we'll have a big mass distribution. The room is painted, the refrigerators and the freezers will be delivered tomorrow, and we'll be open for business hopefully by the middle of the month.
And you need to have the truck before you can be open for business?
Mhm.
And the truck is like $500 of delivery?
Mhm.
So is that what you're waiting on now, Sharon? Okay,
That's
so
all we're
you could.
waiting on.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, may I make a motion, move that
And
we,
he'll be back Friday,
that we
right?
pay the first truck to come into Glen Rock?
Yeah, you may.
Okay, I move that we pay the first truck to come into Glen Rock to get this project started.
I'll second.
Well, thank you.
Do we have to put a dollar amount on that?
It's
motion?
$500 a truck. And we need 4 of them.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any further discussion? Do you have a board?
Oh, yes. And I also have a list of volunteers, which I will bring to City Hall and give to Tammy, and then you guys will have
Okay.
exactly who's our board of directors and who's our volunteers and, oh, yeah.
And
We
Sher-
had to have all that before the food
Right.
bank would even let us establish.
Okay.
Okay.
Sharon, will you have public notification of when that truck's
Yes.
going, so people are aware that it's going to be here and things will be ready to go?
I will have to coordinate that with the Food Bank of the Rockies for the truck. And then as soon as I know that, they'll give us at least 5 days, she said. But we'll put it on social media and we'll splash it in papers, posters around town.
Excellent.
Oh, it's going to be nice. It's a small room, but you know what? We're starting out small, so it's A-okay, and the Lord's with us, so we're going to do just fine.
We're a small town.
That's right. Isn't that awesome? All right.
Sharon, I have a question. Can anybody just go to that, or do you have to meet certain?
Criterion.
Well, for commodities, you have to have an income limit. This is not a commodity truck. This is a food truck. And so it's anybody that feels that they're in need can come. They'll have to sign, of course, and how many people's in their family. And I've never done one before, so it's going to be a maiden voyage for me as well. But the food bank, the food pantry itself, if it the distribution of commodities has to be income-based, but the rest of it does not.
Okay.
If, you know, somebody's humble enough to come in and say, I need food, I wouldn't deny them. I don't think that's our job, that's Scott's job. He knows what they're doing, not me. Okay? Anything else?
Go for it.
We are. Thank you.
Did we vote? We didn't vote, did we? All those in favor? Oh, we did? Okay, motion carried.
Got a hand up.
Yes, sir, Robert.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask the Sharon a question?
Yeah.
So is it a per pound price that you can pay if they're going to come?
Not for the food truck. And it's only 19 cents a pound, and it's asked for donation. If they do not have the money, well, there is grants that we have applied for that will help pay for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's pretty amazing how fast they got that rolling. That was pretty good. Okay, moving on. New business. Deanna Bradshaw.
She's not here. Not here.
Not here.
You're not here for it? What's that? I'm sorry?
What was her request for?
EDC.
We'll put it to the next meeting.
For the next one.
Yeah?
Okay. Okay, Shrivener's Error Ordinance 695.
So this is just an affidavit. We had just a clerical error on an old resolution. That it came up with the annexation of the Danaher, or the vacate and replat of the Danaher property. I got a call from the county that there was a name error. So since it's just a clerical error, we're just filling out this affidavit to change to fix the error. So that's all it is.
I move that we accept this affidavit to correct this clerical error.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any further discussion? Okay, motion carries. Ordinance 714, vacate and replat of Ramel Edition.
Do we have a motion? Do you have a motion?
I move that we accept ordinance 714.
I'll second that.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question on this.
Yeah.
From what I understand of this, this means that the land in Tract C of Oregon Trails Estates is now going to be not valid, and that a new plat will be made of that area? And did that plat belong to someone?
That original plat was Sherry
Romel's, yeah.
total 49 some acres. And she subdivided that into 10 parcels
For her family.
for a replat. So what she's done is she's broke the 149 acre parcel into 10 parcels. And that'll fall into the rural subdivision.
A rural subdivision?
Rural subdivision, so there won't be a necessity for paved roads. They will be on city water, because city water is available to them at that time. City sewer is not cost effective at this point, going to that parcel of property. We've done the same forgiveness when we've done the, what's the sale barn?
Meadowlark?
Meadowlark.
Meadowlark Estates, the sewer was too far, it was not cost effective at that time. So it's in this, it'll be all laid out and called out in the same subdivision proposal.
So will the city be responsible for installing the water? Will the developers be responsible for that?
The water is already there, so we will purchase water.
What about electricity?
Electricity's all there.
Put your house down, be happy.
That's what they're thinking.
Scott, was there going to be any road work? Wasn't there something going to be done on some of the roads?
No, the way it's, if you look at the plat when it was divided, the primary road that goes in is connected to all the lots. So that primary access road is the primary access. Then all it is aprons off of that. So it's existing.
Is there are there two accesses to it? So if there's a fire or something, people get out more than one direction?
Yeah.
There is, it's, all it is, it's a platted easement is what it is, but it is available, yes.
Will we be able to see this plat at some time?
We saw it last at our planning, zoning and planning.
Yeah,
I'll have to
planning
read
and
it.
zoning's got it. It'll, actually, it comes to you on the final
It does, it comes.
of 3 readings, but if you'd like to view it, I do have a copy of it in my office.
Is there any way you could just email it out?
You asked nicely.
Please.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
We had a motion, we need a second.
That's why I thought there was something
Thank
we were
you.
doing with the roads, because I was looking at that from the planning and zoning meeting. I thought we were discussing something on the roads, but maybe not.
Sorry.
Something on the roads, I thought we were discussing at the planning and zoning.
That was, and the question of it is why it was not a, per se, subdivision, because of the lot sizes and the number of lots do not fall into the city subdivision, like we just said.
Okay.
That's where we were talking on that.
Okay.
So there can be a rural subdivision in city limits.
You know, yes, because it
Because of city
qualifies
water.
under ordinance to be that rule.
Okay.
Yes.
Will they be allowed to have horses and animals on these lots?
No, ma'am. Special use permit, if they file for a special animal use permit, they may be granted one, but by ordinance right now, no. But they will be able to have enough room for chickens.
Chicken. You beat me to it. Oh. Okay, I got a motion, need a second?
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on. Resolution 2019-12, acknowledging the conditions of Wyoming State Statute 24-2-111AI. Whereas the state,
We have to read that.
whereas the state of Wyoming, through the Wyoming Department of Transportation, may contribute financial assistance to municipalities with specific populations in order to maintain highways within the municipality as outlined here and below. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, the Transportation Commission may contribute financial assistance to any city or town with a population between 1,500 and 5,000 that is performing its duties under this paragraph in a total amount not to exceed $20 per capita annually to the city or town. And whereas the town of Glen Rock meets these conditions, now therefore be it resolved that the governing body of the town of Glen Rock, Wyoming agrees to comply with the conditions of the Wyoming State Statute as follows. Shall pay all costs of and be responsible for the cleaning, sweeping, and washing and snow removal from the streets and highways. Passed, approved, and adopted on this 22nd day of July 2019.
So we just do this every year.
Do we need a motion to adopt this? I move that we adopt this resolution 2019-12.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any further discussion?
May I ask a question? Randy, is this going to be a problem from your standpoint where it says that the town will be responsible for cleaning?
We do it now.
You already do that, so that's
Yeah,
nothing
this is
new?
just something we have to approve every year.
Okay, so this is just standard stuff. Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, motion carries. Next, Scott, if I pronounce this wrong, I
Oh, wait, we have the
apologize.
liquor license,
Oh, liquor license.
liquor license renewals.
No,
We
no,
just
we
have
do
to
liquor
approve
license.
those.
Liquor license renewals.
I move that we renew the liquor licenses as presented today.
All of them?
Sure.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion? Okay, motion carries. Scott, is that Knudsen? Knudsen?
Gotta have Norwegians around here, Knudsen.
Oh, Knudsen, all right. Rolling Hills, Glen Rock and Rolling Hills Housing Study Presentation. Yes, please.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, good evening. I'm Scott Knudsen from Community Partners Research. Thanks for the chance to be here tonight. My company is based in Minnesota, but we do a lot of our work in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and I think maybe some of our experience in South Dakota, where we've worked extensively for the Governor's Office of Economic Development over the last 7 or 8 years, kind of spilled over, and somehow our name got connected out here in Wyoming. So this is our first set of projects in the state of Wyoming working on housing studies. And I'm here to talk about tonight is some of the highlights of your community's document. I've prepared this 4-page handout. I don't know exactly how much time you've allocated for this, so I guess I should ask that question, because as a city council meeting, I don't know if you have a limitation here on what you want to discuss.
You got 5 minutes. No, I'm kidding.
As I warned Douglas, that just means I talk faster.
This is something that, what did we pay, 10 grand for, or something like that, or
I think we put 8,
was it 8?
yeah.
I think you have the floor as long as you'd like. I think we're all very interested in this.
When you start seeing us fall asleep, you probably need to.
And I've done
But
that
I mean,
before.
as detailed as you could get, I suppose, and what we need, town of Glen Rock.
Sir, I had one question for you when I read through your study. Was any contact made with the school district for their projections of what they see as their class sizes? They see the need for, from kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they tend to project what it's going to look like in high school years. Was that considered at all?
We did not make any contact with the school district as far as their enrollment projections or some of their population projections. You're right, though, a lot of school districts do have that type of information.
Was there a reason you didn't?
Twofold, we did obtain projections and estimates from a number of other different sources, including the state of Wyoming. But a lot of times we're looking at fixed geography, like the city in this case, or excuse me, I knew I was going to do that. I have to apologize. I'm going to call you a city just because where I come from, there aren't really any towns. So I'm sorry. I'll try and do better. We're looking at the town, and the school district oftentimes is quite a large geographical area. I don't know if that's the case with your school district, but it would extend well outside the town boundaries. So it doesn't match up with any of the other fixed geography that we look at, if that makes any sense. So we didn't, so.
I'm sorry. I think school statistics are quite important, and that they have a good reflection on what the future growth of a community is. They monitor that stuff really carefully.
Sure. And we still have a little bit of time that we could possibly make some modifications if that's appropriate to talk to them to just find out about what they're thinking.
I think it would be interesting if you did, just to get some ideas of what they project from their enrollment, not only now, but say the past 5 years, how accurate they have been and what they see as their needs.
Okay. Good. So what I was intending to do was to work through this set of bullet points. It kind of keeps me on topic, but for me, it's my preference that if you have questions or comments and things like that, that we just do it rather, during the course of the presentation rather than wait till the end or that type of thing. So, I mean, works well for me.
It appeared that one of our needs seems to be for low-income housing. Why aren't we hooked up with HUD?
I'll get to that as we go through the bullet points, if that's okay.
Okay.
So I'll maybe build to that one. So most of the work on this was done between February and May. In May, the initial draft was delivered and some discussion was held on that. There weren't a lot of real substantive changes after that draft, but some things have been modified. What I'm going to run through is some of the highlights of the sections that are contained in the overall larger document, starting with some of the demographic and income information. We do talk in here about population. There's some confusion, I think, on population levels for the town. Part of that, I think, has to do with the whole issue of temporary versus permanent residents, and I'm not sure how anyone is really accurately estimating that. Generally speaking, though, population is based on permanent residents, not folks living in, say, a long-term stay in a motel or a camper or RV, that type of thing, unless this is their permanent home. I'm not actually that concerned about population anyway, but there is some population information in here. For me, I'm more focused on households because from a housing studies standpoint, a household by its definition needs an independent housing unit. So when you talk about household estimates and household projections, that starts to inform the need for housing units that are needed in the future. And the best information that we had about Glen Rock was that the community has probably added between about 15 and 30 permanent resident households so far this decade. The higher end of that range, I guess, in my opinion, would imply that there's probably been some annexation activity. I think there was maybe a mobile home park that was brought in. So some of the household growth may have been attributed to annexation. Some of it is natural growth with addition of housing units and addition of population and households. The household growth of at least 15 households would generally be consistent with the changes that we were able to track in the community's housing stock. There's been a 10-unit apartment building built, maybe 5 to 10 single-family houses before allowing for any housing unit losses. The growth in the housing stock would probably be something in that range of around 15, and so that tends to make sense to us. But it could be more or less depending on vacant housing that may have existed once upon a time. These days, I don't tend to think that there's much vacant housing out there in your community. Going forward, if you're going to add new permanent resident households, it's probably going to be a one-to-one for housing unit growth. There has to be a housing unit for those people to move into because you're probably at capacity now based on what we could tell with the use of the available housing stock, with a few possible exceptions. Age-based estimates show that the town has been adding households age 65 and older. Generally, the estimates show there's probably been a net reduction of households age 64 and younger so far this decade. I want to caution people that that's largely due to what I'd call age progression patterns. That's not to imply that younger people are moving out of the community. What it means is that large baby boom segment is aging through the population cycle. And now most baby boomers are 55 and older. In the next 5 years, most will be 60 and older. So as they've moved through, that's kind of shifted the aging pattern of the community, and there haven't been as many younger households following behind them to kind of fill in that void. That's why those numbers tend to reflect that way. But in your community, there are a fair number of households age 65 and older, and especially when you project forward over the next 5 years. You've had traditionally a high rate of home ownership, somewhere between 30 to 34% rental, probably 66 to 70% home ownership. But as the second largest community in the county, you do have a stock of rental housing, and you're the second largest rental center in the county. So you do have some diverse rental housing options and some of the things that we'll talk about in terms even of subsidized housing and those types of things. Income information, we've got a data lag going on here. The best income information we can pull is from 2017. And it may not reflect the current economic conditions as job growth has been occurring. 2017 probably connected with some of the, the bus cycle, the last bus cycle, and so incomes may have been low. That said, the statistics that we had for Glen Rock actually showed that there was a decrease in the median household income level between 2012 and 2017. But it's important to state that the median family income in the community at nearly $81,000 was relatively high and actually above the statewide and countywide medians. So even though incomes may not have been growing rapidly in the community, you're still a fairly high income community by comparative standards based on those American Community Survey income statistics. The estimated median income for owner households in 2017 was approximately $71,300. Fewer than 20% of homeowners had an annual income below $35,000, and only 12% of all homeowners reported what we'd consider to be a cost burden, where they're applying 30% or more of their income towards their housing costs. So that's a relatively low cost burden for homeowners. But again, most homeowners had better income levels, and that's part of the reason they didn't necessarily have a housing cost burden. The estimated median income for renter households was above average at approximately $41,000, just under $41,000 in 2017. But you did have a number of renters, approximately 37% of renters, had an annual income below $35,000. And so those are the people that are most vulnerable for generally a housing cost burden. And nearly 27% of all renter households in the community did report that they were paying a disproportionately large share of their income for housing. The estimated median gross rent in the community was about $720 in 2017. So most of it was due to their lower income level, not necessarily an astronomically high rent that was causing the cost burden to occur. Existing housing highlights, moving to page 2, exact housing construction reports year by year were not obtained, but again, we do know of a 10-unit rental, probably between 5 and 10 single-family homes, if that fits with your recollection of this so far this decade. So there has been some growth in the housing stock, although it has not been rapid growth in the housing stock. Glen Rock has a large supply of residential lots, and I think I heard this alluded to in some of the earlier comments in the council meeting. But from what we could tell, they may not actually be readily available for purchase or actively being marketed. There are also some larger land parcels, and I think that may have been talked about too, that there may be some houses that can be built on larger tracts now. But realistically, if you're going to add to the owner occupancy side of the equation, making lots available to potential home builders, potential home buyers is going to be an issue, I think, for your community, and one that it sounds like you're on your way to possibly addressing through some methods and means. Median price for existing single-family home sales, that was difficult for us to track because Wyoming does not disclose at the county level sales records, so we had to turn to secondary sources. But generally speaking, the best information we could find is that the median home value for owner-occupied homes in the city or in the town was about $185,000 or higher. So again, relatively high home values, and again, for a small town, I mean, we do a lot of work in South Dakota, and you wouldn't typically see too many towns in South Dakota that had this population level that would have $185,000 median price. But that has something to do with your location. It has something to do with the demand for housing, with the job growth that's going on in the area, and homes apparently retain their value, which again, I think is a strong point for building new homes going forward when home values are that high on existing houses. Interestingly enough, you also have fairly high values for mobile homes, at least based on the American Community Survey. About 71,000 was the estimated median value. Now that may be subject to a margin of error flaw in the American Community Survey, but it implied to me that there's pretty strong demand again for housing, and so that even mobile homes in recent years have had fairly high values in the community. You do have a large stock of mobile homes relative to the size of your community in terms of percentage. Housing itself overall is not overly old, but the median year of construction was 1975 for owner-occupied housing in the community and 1976 for rental units. So basically, a majority of your houses are more than 40 years old. Maybe less of an issue with some of the home ownership stuff, but oftentimes rental housing, when it's that age, does need some deferred maintenance and improvement. Some of the wear and tear that goes on in rental housing from frequent moves and higher turnover and those types of things. Rental market conditions is the next section we talk about, and there's a section in here that does deal with rental properties, at least the multifamily rental properties that exist in the community. Again, your rental tenure rate, the number of renter households was about 34% at the time of the 2010 census. It's probably changed very little since that time, but it is possible that some houses have converted from owner occupancy to rental or back and forth, so there could have been some minor changes in the rental to home ownership rate. One interesting feature of your community is most of the rental stock is in what I'd call 1 and 2 unit structures, mobile homes, single family houses, duplexes, that type of thing. With the exception of some of the subsidized apartments, you really don't have any larger apartment buildings or apartment complexes, so you have a relatively small share of your rental housing that's in larger multifamily buildings. When we did our telephone survey of multifamily rental projects, we found no vacancies in the conventional market rate segment, and we found that those owners, managers we talked to generally talked of significant demand, frequent calls, people looking for rental housing. I do have to say, though, that again, you don't have many conventional rentals in multifamily buildings, so we didn't do a big survey there, but I have no reason to believe that the single-family rentals in town and the mobile homes aren't popular too, given the number of people looking for housing in your region. Conventional rental rates are generally in what I'd call a modest price range, but it is important to point out that again, in single-family rental situations, mobile homes, tenants will generally pay all utilities. So if you add into the utility on top of the contract rent, those rents may be getting a little bit higher. But generally speaking, what we tended to see in both Glen Rock and in Douglas was a lot of the managers, owners talked about keeping long-term tenants. They didn't want to displace people in a current boom, because what happens in the bus cycles, if the workers move out, they're left with high vacancy rates. So they were very cognizant of not driving up the rents, in my opinion, not wanting to displace long-term residents of your community, long-term renters in their properties. So that has helped to keep rents in a more modest range. Glen Rock does have a relatively large supply of subsidized housing, and here we get into some of the HUD-related stuff and the low-income housing. There's the 20 units for senior disabled occupancy and 86 units for general occupancy. We did find full occupancy and a reported waiting list in the senior disabled project. I believe is that one called Barber Apartments, working from memory, I think. However, there was a relatively high rate of vacancy that existed in the general occupancy projects. And I think what that was largely attributed to when we talked to the manager was, again, wages for the jobs that are being created are above the income limits for that type of subsidized housing. So what happens is people want to live there, they apply, they get rejected because their income is too high. So that was the one segment of the market that was a bit weak, was the income-based subsidized housing for general occupancy. You do not, turning to the top of the next page, and I think this maybe gets to the councilwoman's question about the voucher program, if I'm not mistaken, you are not served by any kind of tenant-based rent assistance program in this county. HUD has the Housing Choice Voucher Program. It's offered in neighboring counties, and it allows tenants to rent in the private marketplace with a voucher that helps them pay their rent. So they effectively pay 30% of their income, and just for discussion purposes, let's say they can afford $200 a month based on 30% of income. Their rent is $500. The voucher puts in the missing $300. But you are not served by that program in this county, and that's one of the things we talked about in Douglas as well. It's just never been extended here, and it is a good protection for some of the lower income renters that may exist in the community. That said, you have vacancies in your project-based subsidized housing, so in Glen Rock's case, the voucher program may not be quite as important as it would be in some other communities, because a low-income person could immediately move into one of your subsidized buildings right now without needing a voucher. However, in the longer term, if pressure grows for affordable housing, vouchers may be something you'd want to pursue and see if you could get a voucher program in your county. Temporary forms of housing, including campgrounds, RV parks, showed very strong demand. Again, frequent calls were reported, people looking for a place to park. Temporary forms of housing, you know, throughout the county, I think, wherever those are being offered are very much in demand and popular. Economic and commuting highlights, the county labor statistics that are cited here are generally Bureau of Labor Statistics, state data. It's real systematically collected, and it isn't particular oftentimes to Glen Rock. But as a county, there's been obviously some boom and bust cycles in the past. 2014 was the peak year for labor force and employment for county residents. But still, the situation, at least in terms of job growth and unemployment, continues to improve. And in 2018, the last full year of data, the county's unemployment rate was down to 3.6%. The largest employment sector in the county in 2018 was mining, quarry, and oil and gas as a broad super sector. Average wage at full-time employment was more than $85,000 in that sector. So again, knowing, yeah, I mean, you know this intuitively, but the types of jobs that are being created in the energy sector pay pretty well. But overall, in all industry sectors, the average weekly wage, if you take it out to full-time employment, was over $53,000 for all jobs in the county. While some Glen Rock residents do work locally, most commute. And I guess, you know, there aren't maybe a ton of jobs that are offered right in the community itself, and so people use this as a destination to commute from. Approximately 59% of Glen Rock residents were traveling 20 minutes or more for their primary job in 2017 when this information was collected. For people that actually worked in Glen Rock, approximately 27% were commuting 20 more miles or more to get to the town. So again, most of the people that work right in your community either already lived here or lived in the immediate surrounding area. So there isn't a long commute for most people that work in the community. However, residents of your community that go outward oftentimes travel 20 minutes or more. Some of the key findings and recommendations contained in this document. We did look at multiple projection sources, we did look at multiple estimates, and we tried to distill down what makes sense. A couple of the national sources that we looked at, one is called ESRI, which is oftentimes used by financial institutions. Another one called Applied Geographic Solutions is used by the state of Wyoming in their Economic Development Office. So we looked at both of those, but I'm not sure that those national sources completely capture what's going on in this county. I mean, they don't really have that perspective. One is based in California, and I forget where the other one's based, and I'm not sure they're really in touch with local changes that may occur. Instead, what we oftentimes relied on was the projections that were contained in the draft environmental impact statement, and we worked with those. However, we did place a significantly greater percentage of housing units, in our opinion, that are likely to wind up in what I'd call permanent housing in Glen Rock. If you read that draft environmental impact statement, a lot of the housing demand they're anticipating in your community will go into the temporary forms of housing. We do think, however, that the town has the ability to capture more of that in terms of permanent household growth, primarily for renters, but also for home ownership going forward. And in the recommendations that follow, we were working with a total of approximately 100 permanent housing units being added in Glen Rock over the next 5 or 6 years as kind of a goal for the community. And this does, again, assume that you're going to capture more of those households that might otherwise go into temporary forms of housing. Now, I will put in one little caveat here, is that when we had these discussions in Douglas and we had some discussions with county commissioners, there's maybe a thinking that we're a little aggressive in some of these permanent housing recommendations, and so that may be something that people consider. With all of this, we're talking about building these units over, like I say, the next 5 or 6 years, generally to the year 2025, and we would fully expect that these units will be staged. They wouldn't all be dropped in at once. So in other words, as some units get built, especially for rental housing, there'll be some comparables that can be looked at. You really haven't had much new rental housing built in this community in a long time. So it's hard to track absorption patterns and that type of thing. But over time, we would like to see some of these introduced in phases. And if everything is going well and being absorbed, I would suggest that these recommendations are very achievable. We would expect that the rental housing would probably be built front-end loaded, if I can use that term, that a lot of that demand for rental housing will exist in the near term as people come into the community and initially want to rent. Some of the home ownership demand will be a little bit more towards the tail end of this projection period. As people find that they have a permanent job, they like the area, they like their job, they like the community, they may look to move from rental to ownership housing. At least that's what we'd expect. So these aren't necessarily linear progressions, that there's an average number of units per year. In Glen Rock, one of the things that we did is we put basically all of the demand for new rental housing construction in what we'd call the conventional market rate segment, people that can afford to pay. We don't see as much demand in this community for certain types of affordable housing. And again, part of that is based on the fact that you have some vacancies in the current subsidized units, and that, again, the jobs that are being created tend to pay wages that are above those. There will be some demand for subsidized and very affordable housing, but again, you do have a fairly good supply of those units in the community right now and some excess capacity. As far as single-family housing is concerned, we see that you have the potential to meet the demand for single-family houses, again, assuming you can solve the lot options issue, and that lots are available for people that want to build houses. We again have proceeded with a projection that near-term demand will exist for approximately 35 to 40 owner occupancy units over this projection period on an annual basis. That would equate to, say, 5 to 7 houses per year. It is possible that some of this demand will locate outside the community and locate in the rural areas around you. I mean, homeowners, it's a pure market transaction. They're working with the builder, they're buying a lot, they're building a house. Some of them may choose to live in rural areas. You know, we can't exactly place where that activity would be located. With rental housing, it makes sense, obviously, for all that rental housing to be located within Glen Rock. For owner occupancy housing, some of it may be in the rural areas immediately surrounding the community. And again, we've kind of talked about the gradual growth in home ownership over time. We do at the end, though, throw in some of these cautions, because I think any builder developer that reads this, while we are fairly bullish on housing demand going forward, there are the recognitions of the boom and bust cycles. There are the recognitions that over time there will be a depletion of workforce as a lot of these wells get drilled. A lot of the labor force goes into drilling and exploring for wells, and after they're operational, they generally need fewer people. So if you look at those long-term projections, after the years like 2027, 2028, you start to see a drop-off in a lot of the accumulated population that had moved in to take those drilling type of jobs. So people have to recognize that near term there's a lot of demand, then it may drop off a bit farther down the line, and developers need to be cautious of that. So with that, that's kind of my whirlwind presentation, and now we can maybe talk about questions and comments.
During preparing this report, did you study the potential for land available within Glen Rock to build housing, where it's saying we're going to have 45 to 50 permanent housing units? Do we have that much space in Glen Rock to put up 45 to 50 houses?
You have more single-family lots than that if they're accessible. That's at least my understanding from the research.
But the ones that are quote-unquote locked up, take those out of the market, where do we stand?
Yes, then I don't think you do. Then I think lots become an issue.
So basically, if we can't get access to those lots, we have a real problem trying to put 40 to 50 houses in Glen Rock.
At least if you see this as realistic potential, yeah, you're not going to get there with your lot inventory unless some of those become available in the marketplace. It'd be my understanding. The difficulty, of course, is going to be for any private developer to go in and create a new subdivision when there's already improved lots in the community that suddenly could come up for sale. I mean, it's not an easy situation to solve.
So how do we address the issue of there being a lack of affordable housing for families that come into town? Seeing, like, if there's one or two bedroom houses of what is available, and you have a family coming in as a low income, how can we address their needs?
Given the home values, if you're talking about home ownership, I think that is a distinct problem, because the median home value being around 185, even though that's less expensive than a lot of the new construction options, it still isn't overly affordable to a more moderate income household. And so, yes, I mean, that's going to continue to be, I think to the extent you can see new housing construction occur, though, you might see what we kind of call that roll-up factor. If you can get people in older existing houses to build new, sell their older existing house, you get that rollover going in the existing housing stock. The most affordable housing is the stuff you already have on the ground.
So do we need to be looking at getting subsidized housing for people that have large families that are coming in and trying to live in Glen Rock and establish themselves without having to buy one of these more expensive houses?
I would say not on the rental side at this point in time, at least based on the vacancies that we saw, unless you're talking about extremely large families that might need, 4 or 5 bedrooms, then I can't really speak that those units would be out there, but
I think there's quite a bit of housing for low-income, 1, 2, 3 bedroom housing still available for folks.
I mean, that's the vacancies we tended to find.
And then what you talked about, that's a catch-22 too. You get too much income, then they can't live there.
Right.
So it's a tough.
That's why we see truly market rate rental housing creation as kind of the primary goal for the community.
Sharon, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd like to say something. The one thing I didn't hear addressed was, I have begged everybody, including the governor, that we need more multiple bedroom, handicap accessible units in our state. We have veterans coming home. We have elderly with children that are disabled. We have children that are taking care of elderly parents. They don't want them to go to a nursing home. And there are not enough handicap accessible multiple bedroom units in this state, period. Not just this community, this state. I see it every month out there at Trails. I've been there 19 years, and I can tell you on an average month, we turn away 5 veterans. That's pathetic, because we don't have multiple bedroom handicap accessible units in this area, ever. It's not here. So I didn't hear that addressed in this little survey, so I know when people called me, I always bring that up, so.
And we did not collect information specifically on the accessible units that exist, although I do believe that almost all of the subsidized properties would have at least some accessible units, but they could be in 1 bedrooms.
So 1 bedroom. So
Right.
Trails is 1 bedroom, and they only have 1 bedroom unit at Glen Rock, or at, Glen Rock Apartments, and it's only a 1 bedroom. So, a Barber apartment, I think, goes up to 2, but they have an age limit. So, yeah, we have to deny them, we can't keep them.
I've let Scott stay awfully quiet here, so maybe I'll shoot one his way. But is there a requirement, say if a new apartment building gets built under like a state building code, would there be a requirement that a certain number or percentage of units be accessible or adaptable?
Depending on the funding, if they received any kind of funding from the state, municipality, then definitely yes.
But not a pure private market housing
Not a
project?
pure private market.
Interesting, okay. Because typically I thought that there would maybe be some kind of a percentage set aside in any new building that would at least create some.
There is incentive for private funded money to put in 80 accessible apartments or bedrooms, but it's all once again up to the government.
And that creates an interesting idea that, maybe if there is some city incentive that gets put into this, and I don't know what that may be, if you sell land to a developer or something like that at a discounted price, possibly some of the things you ask for back in return is, 10% of the units being adaptable at least, even if they're not fully accessible, where they have the ability to adapt them if someone with a wheelchair, for instance, moves in there, those types of things. And so those might be the type of things, if there's any city assistance put forward to future development, that you stipulate. So.
It looks like, according to your table on page 18, that we have a large amount of income of people in Glen Rock that have a pretty limited income, and yet our rent seems to be fairly high. Doesn't that kind of indicate we have a big deficit in our housing needs here?
So you do have, page 18 showed some income distribution information by renter and ownership status. And so, yes, you do have, I think I said earlier, about 37% of your renter households have an annual income below $35,000. But you do have, starting to approach 100 households, or more than 100, that have an income below $25,000. But you do also have to remember, again, that you do have a number of subsidized projects, which is exactly what that type of housing is designed for, is for people that have modest income levels. So you've got the Barber Apartments, I forget the names of the trails, is that Glen Rock? So between those, that's some of that subsidized housing is helping probably to address some of that demand from those low-income people. But yes, besides that, you do have a percentage of renters that have a cost burden that are applying a disproportionately large share of their income for housing.
So based upon what you've seen from the income and your study here, what would you say our three biggest needs in Glen Rock are in housing, just from your experience with this study?
I didn't put it in terms of three, so you're going to put me on the spot, but I'm going to say, what I think you're going to want to see is as much permanent housing capture as you can versus temporary housing. At least, in my opinion, for the community to grow, you'd like to take advantage of this and see some new housing stock created. That's primarily going to be rental, but you also want to promote that home ownership side. Again, if you look at the draft environmental impact statement, they don't anticipate much growth in home ownership as a result of the oil and gas activity. I think the city or the town, Douglas, in your case, have a chance to capture some of that with long-term homeowners, which adds to the stability of the community. So I think achieving those two goals, getting permanent housing and getting the highest rate of home ownership you can, should be a couple of the goals of the community. To do that, you're probably going to need to do maybe some proactive efforts, and I guess that would be number 3. You may have to work to try and free up residential lots to make them available. I don't know what the city's appetite is for becoming actively involved, but talking about things like city incentives that might help create some adaptable or accessible units. Are there some things that you can throw into the deal to help spur some of this activity and actually achieve the kinds of goals you want to achieve? And maybe that's even going to be a set aside of some more affordable units, so that if a 30-unit apartment building gets built, 5 of them are set aside at a lower rent structure to help some lower and moderate income people live there as well, and not just higher income. So those are the kinds of things, I guess, that I would see as maybe city goals or town goals, town incentives, those types of things. So.
Thank you. I have a question for our county commissioner, or a person who knows more about the county than I do. This thing of this kosher beef plant, is that a real project? Is that going to happen?
My opinion, no, but other opinion, yeah. I think it's kind of died down. The conversation has died down about it. It was going pretty hot a year ago, but we haven't heard much about it lately.
Geez, 500 jobs, that's like, wow.
Yeah. They would be clear on the other end of the county.
Oh.
Yeah, clear.
So we're safe.
Is there any more comments, questions?
I don't exactly know how I'm going to proceed with the next step, because I think I was also supposed to talk a bit about Rolling Hills, but I don't know how I do that in your council meeting.
It was agreed.
Okay.
Yeah, so
all right.
We're prepared.
And we've got a Rolling Hills person here.
Okay. Yeah, I know we had some people from Rolling Hills. And I also wanted to alert people that there is another separate document. It's only about 6 or 7 pages long. That's kind of called the Converse County Summary. And since these studies were done for Douglas, Glen Rock, and Rolling Hills all at the same time, but you each have standalone documents, there was an attempt to try and put some of that information in here so that there's kind of a short, concise piece that talks about all of the communities in aggregate in terms of some of the housing unit demand. With Rolling Hills, it's a much shorter presentation. There again are some varying estimates on what's going on in the community as far as population and household growth, but I would have to say, based on what we could see, we view it as a very stable community. If there's been much population change, it has probably to do with more children or fewer children per household. I mean, it isn't going to be a dramatic shift in population nor in households. Near as we could tell, there was about 1 new housing unit that's been built so far this decade. So you have really no change in the housing stock. Assuming that people are living in the existing houses that are there, you're not seeing much change in household and population. Rolling Hills tends to be a little bit younger than, say, Glen Rock, but still they are showing net household growth in the 55 and older age ranges, reduction of households in 54 and younger, again attributed to the aging patterns. Unlike Glen Rock and Douglas, Rolling Hills is almost exclusively an owner occupancy housing community. I mean, there may be 1 or 2 houses that have converted to rental use over time, but basically it's a 95+% owner occupancy community. Single family homes, no diversity in the housing stock other than single family. There are no multifamily buildings or that type of thing. Income information, again, when you look at Rolling Hills, income levels are really high. The estimated median household income was about $82,000 and the median family income was above $90,000, well above the statewide and countywide medians. But that makes perfect sense because you have largely what you have there are families that own their housing that are working age people. And so they don't have, where you have senior housing, you have retirees in this community, there's much less of that in Rolling Hills. That tends to drive the incomes higher because almost everyone has earned income. Exact housing construction records were not obtained from Rolling Hills, but like I say, based on discussions with city staff, it's probable that maybe only 1 house has been built in the community since 2010. Up until recently, there have not been a lot of lot options in the community. There's maybe been a handful of lots, but in 2019, it's our understanding that the town did acquire a larger parcel of land and plans to subdivide that into some large lot options. And that may make 13, 15 large lots available in the future. Again, the median home value is hard to track, but we would place the median estimated home value in Rolling Hills at above $200,000, probably the highest of the 3 communities. But again, what you have is mostly 1970s and 1980s built houses in that community. And so there really isn't an older housing stock or anything. It's all kind of homogeneous from about a 20-year time period is when most of it was built. It also tends to come with fairly large land holdings, at least a couple of acres, which also brings up some of the value. The estimated year of construction for owner occupancy housing is 1976 in Rolling Hills. And unlike other communities in the county, there really are no forms of temporary housing that have evolved in Rolling Hills. I mean, they don't have the campgrounds, they don't have the RV parks, they don't have hotels and motels that convert to long-term stay, those types of things. So again, it's really just an owner occupancy single-family housing community. The community, or excuse me, economic development highlights are largely the same in terms of unemployment rate and wages. However, when we get to that last bullet in this section, there are almost no jobs right in Rolling Hills proper, so basically everyone that's working age in Rolling Hills does commute. While some may work in Glen Rock, most are commuting a longer distance. Nearly 68% said that they were traveling 30 minutes or more to their primary employment. So people are making a choice to live out there, commute a longer distance, but to have that rural lifestyle, to own a house and some land in Rolling Hills. Once again, we looked at the same types of projection methodologies. The draft environmental impact statement again talks heavily of the demand for housing in Rolling Hills being temporary, even though they state that in the town proper, there's really no opportunity for temporary housing. So realistically, what we would see going forward is probably 20 or fewer permanent housing units in Rolling Hills through this projection period to like 2025, 2026. They would all be single-family houses and they would all be owner occupancy type houses. We do not see that community as a logical place to build rental housing, just given the density that's typically associated with multifamily buildings and the fact that they don't have, I believe, city sewer system. They do have the water system, but again, multifamily development is really not practical in that type of setting. With some demand, though, for owner occupancy housing, I think it's a good timing for the city to be moving forward with their new lot options. However, at least in my opinion, once you get past that first phase of development, you're going to start investing significantly more, larger amounts of money into the water system to extend water lines. And I think unless there's really strong demonstrated demand that those lots are selling quickly and people are building homes, it's going to be a difficult proposition to want to invest a lot in a water system extension for something until we can actually demonstrate that, say, more than 15 or 20 houses will be built in that community. And so I think the real world in this case will kind of dictate what they do with those future extensions of water. And with that, I guess I'd say if there's any of the Rolling Hills people that have any particular questions.
I guess that kind of covered the questions I was going to ask you, kind of.
Okay.
How much land did you say Rolling Hills had? The city's got lots up there, right? Do you have, guys have lots up there?
We're in the process right now of that 600 acres. We're right now looking at setting the first ones that are on the Edmond Town Road, looking at breaking those out because there's water right there to those, so that would go, I think we calculated like 15, 18 lots, something like that. That could be right on that road, and then from there, we could extend the water system, but as I say, we got to do more water studies to find out the availability, what size of, we might not be able to. That lot or the land that we bought with more than, is a little bit more than double what the town size is right now. So I don't know if we'd be able to do 2.5 acre lots and supply water to them. So bigger lots anyway. So.
Yeah, and I guess to the extent that maybe wells are drilled rather than city water service, if you went to say like a 5-acre lot or something like that, that would at least eliminate that need for a big city front-end investment in water lines and pumping, pumping stations or whatever it would take, pressurizing. So.
Now would that go kind of hand in hand with the lots availability in Glenrock then too?
Well, I mean, I think that the chance that both communities could offer some attractive building sites, obviously the next couple of years are going to be critical that way to try and attract some home ownership growth. But yeah, I mean, I guess to the extent that if Glenrock doesn't have lots available, I guess that becomes a marketing advantage to Rolling Hills, in all truth. I mean, but I am assuming that Glenrock will have some lots available as well. It's just whether the big bulk of lots that are kind of unavailable right now come into the marketplace, or at least some of them do. So
It sure be nice because the utilities are there.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's already a big city investment in infrastructure that you'd like to see used. So.
But it looks like we might be having 10 more here, about a month. How many lots were they gonna have?
Lots, locations, yes.
6?
There'd be 8 left. Sounds like it's gonna be kind of more reserved for family.
No.
And these are large lots again, aren't they? These are those larger parcels, right? So I mean, again, more competitive with what Rolling Hills might be offering, so.
Mike's got a question. I don't have a question. Ask me a question about the
Kosher.
Cindy with the enterprise. She should probably answer your question. I don't mean much about it. It's her thing.
The project is still, we're still having dialogue on the project. We're still looking at it. The people that own the business are still insisting that it is going to happen. So that's, but they haven't purchased their land yet. They're talking about the possibility of that this fall. But until that land is purchased, I mean, it's just like, we all talk to people and we all are hopeful that projects come. There are also a couple of other projects that I'm working on as well. And so if any of them come through, it could be good for all of them. And it could add jobs and families and the need for housing. And you add that on to all of these other things that Scott has come up with in his study. And I think it's all very real, that we all need to look at this very seriously and see what we can all do.
Do you have an idea of where they're looking to buy the land?
For their business?
Yeah.
Yes, I do, and they have some pretty big, the two have some very specific needs. And so it isn't like they can just look for 20 acres somewhere.
Yeah.
They have very, very, very specific needs. The third one is a little more general, and I really haven't, I've been told that there's a project that's going to be moving forward, but they have not contacted me yet. I'm hearing it through another party. So I think theirs will be more general. The other two are very, very specific. I'm sorry, I can't tell you.
No, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I didn't see you sitting over there.
So it could be a good direct impact on our communities?
Yes,
Okay.
I think so. I think no matter where these businesses build in Converse County, I think it can directly impact.
But when he's telling us that Rolling Hills residents drive 30 minutes. Yeah, so I mean, if they built, clear out by Lost Springs, I mean, that's maybe 40-minute drive, right, or something, but, I mean, the circumference is, so. Any other questions?
I guess I would like to thank Cindy for setting this up and being kind of the lead contact person, but I also want to thank Scott because he was very helpful through the research process and feeding me information and things like that. And I don't mean to leave out others that may be in the room that I've talked to, but those two in particular had a big part in this research process, so.
Will you have any kind of follow-up study for us, or is this?
This is the document.
This is it.
Although I will try and make some contact with the school district, and if I think I learned something that's worthwhile, we'll put out a revision with some of that added.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think it was very informative. I think it'll be good for us, and I think with the economic growth and things, that I think the schools will come along right with that, what they're looking for.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Moving on to bills and claims.
I move we pay our bills and claims as presented by the treasurer.
I'll second that.
Okay. Been moved and seconded. Vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any further discussion?
I have a question.
I do too.
I see here where we're paying Willie, but I also see in the paper that we're advertising for a new tree trimmer. I don't understand.
The one we just paid Willie was back in the last budget.
Oh, okay, so we're
He just
still,
turned the bill in. I've been after him to turn the bill in.
oh, so we're looking for new tree trimmers? Or,
I had to advertise for that.
oh, okay,
The
'cause I was,
advertisement's up, opening the bids Friday, and Willie won the bid again.
okay, because I wasn't aware that
Yeah.
we were,
We had a couple, I had a couple inquiries from Casper Tree Trimmers, so I put it up to bid again.
oh, okay, because I
That's
did.
what I did.
Okay.
To make it fair for everybody.
Where are these trees that are going to be trimmed?
Town parks, boulevards, anything that's in our right of way that we own,
Okay.
or removed if they're dead.
I just had the question on the reimbursement for you.
For me?
Yeah, you didn't get a visa or something, or?
It was the mileage from here to the
gotcha.
airport and
Okay.
back, and then one small meal.
Okay.
So.
That was the only question. Anybody else?
Oh, and this is off the deal, but the trees along, as you're going down the hill out of town off to the left, are those town trees? Those old dead ones that hang off Hopkins' old house? I don't know who lives there now.
Hopkins.
As you're going out of town on the highway, there's a bunch of dead ones.
By the river, by the creek?
Or past,
But on up.
past the creek, you mean?
Towards town, on the north side of the highway. There's like a little dirt walk path, and there's a bunch of dead trees, and I didn't know
Bruce and
that was town.
Honestly, talked about that, and we're gonna try to get the landlord, because that's actually theirs.
Oh,
If they
okay.
won't do it, I think, because that's actually a walk path
Yeah,
to keep people off the highway. I think we need to get it cleaned up. So I'm going to visit with the landowners there to get those cleaned up.
plus they don't look good.
Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, motion carries. And we do not need a
Nope.
motion for adjournment, so if there's nothing else, meeting's adjourned.
Gotcha. Gotcha.